Good?
Skin tone.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and make a darker version and a lighter version. And you can see as I'm doing this, I'm not thinking too hard about it. I'm just grabbing a little bit of each color and mixing it in, and then using my eye to notice as it's getting darker or lighter and just adjusting as I go. So I'm adding a little bit of all five. The balance between the red and the yellow is going to be important. So if you end up too pink, add a little bit more yellow, you add it, and vice versa. And then if you end up too dark or too light, you go to the opposite ends and add a little more umber or a little bit more white, but add tiny bits at a time. That way you won't waste your paint by going too far in any one direction. It's also the reason I'm using the brush and not the palette knife. I think I talked to you guys about how it's kind of a better habit to use a palette knife because you won't screw up your brushes. However, for something like this, grabbing paint just with the tip of like a fine-haired brush works really well, because then you can just grab a tiny bit at a time, mix it in, and work pretty quickly. So I'm doing the same thing for a lighter version. And in this case, I'm just adding a little bit less red and a little bit less of that dark umber. You can think of this as a recipe with these five colors, but like any recipe, you can also, once you get comfortable and you kind of know what those five colors are going to do, you can also add a little bit of green or blue as complements to pull it more cool. What I'm doing now is I'm adding a little bit more red to both. And what that's going to do is give you a pinker flesh tone, and those pink areas are going to be on parts of your body where there's more blood flow. So in terms of the lighter pinks, you're going to see areas like that on the palm of your hand when you flex, the tips of your fingers. If you have light skin, you might see it on your knuckles or on your nose. If you have dark skin, you might see some of that darker red around the edges of your lips, around nostrils as light hits it, things like that. And it's just places in your body where there's a lot of blood vessels. For the lightest light, I'm adding more white and more yellow. If you find that you think your value is kind of accurate, but your figure looks like a corpse, you probably added a lot of white and not enough yellow. It seems like you want to warm it up, then you end up with this really rosy pink that's kind of artificial. So getting that balance between adding white and then a little bit of yellow and a little bit of red to lighter highlights helps. You can also lighten up with less pink and less white and a little more yellow, and you end up with bronzer skin tones. So observing whether the skin tone you're painting leans a little bit more bronze, a little bit more pink in the highlights can help you kind of adjust if you're thinking things don't look quite accurate. And then the last thing I'm doing here is I'm adding more brown for darker skin or for shadows. And the umber by itself is sort of a neutral brown. It leans a little bit warm. I'm adding some blue to it. You can use that for shadows. You can use that to diversify your skin tone. And you can also do that for areas where you need to differentiate between skin that looks dark and then shadows that look darker. And then same mix, but with quite a bit of white added to it. Can be good for highlights in some places. It can also be good for eye bags and under eye rings in paler skin. And that's really all there is to it. Once you get the hang of that, go ahead and add other color.